There is a moment, standing at the edge of Millennium Park in downtown Chicago, when the skyline seems to lean toward you. Glass and steel and stone, each tower a silent argument for human possibility. But there is one building among them that carries a particular story, a story of pride, of catastrophic miscalculation, and of hard-won reinvention. It rises 83 floors above the northeast corner of the Chicago Loop, at 200 East Randolph Street. It is the Aon Center. And the history it holds is stranger, more dramatic, and more deeply human than its clean white facade would ever suggest. To understand why this building exists, you have to understand Standard Oil of Indiana in the years surrounding 1970. The company was one of the most powerful energy corporations on Earth, flush with revenue and hungry for permanence. Its previous headquarters sat at 910 South Michigan Avenue, a building constructed in 1911 by the Carpin Brothers Furniture Company and purchased by Standard Oil in 1927. Respectable, functional, but by the early 70s, wholly inadequate for a company that measured itself against giants. Standard Oil wanted more than office space. It wanted a statement, a monument cast in stone and steel that the Chicago skyline could not ignore. Chicago in those years was a city in full architectural flight. The post-war economic boom had transformed the Loop into a proving ground for the modern skyscraper. Engineers and architects were pressing against the outer boundaries of what steel and concrete could achieve. Height records were being set and broken within years of one another. The race upward was not merely aesthetic. It was economic, political, and deeply personal. To build the tallest building in your city was to plant a flag visible to an entire civilization. Standard Oil meant to plant theirs. They hired two of the most respected names in American architecture. Edward Durell Stone, whose portfolio stretched from the original Museum of Modern Art in New York to the Kennedy Center in Washington, brought refinement and gravitas to the project. Alongside him, the firm of Perkins and Will brought deep roots in the Chicago architectural tradition, a lineage that understood this city's relationship with height and structure. Together, they conceived a tower of sweeping, uninterrupted verticality, clean, authoritative, monumental. Construction completed in 1973. The Standard Oil building, nicknamed almost immediately and affectionately Big Stan, stood 1,136 feet tall across 83 floors. On the day it opened, it was the tallest completed building in the city of Chicago and the fourth tallest building anywhere on Earth. Only the twin towers of the original World Trade Center and the Empire State Building in New York City rose higher into the sky. The engineering behind this tower was as ambitious as its height demanded. The architects and structural engineers employed a tubular steel-framed structural system anchored by V-shaped perimeter columns wrapping the exterior of the building. These were not decorative flourishes. They were precision instruments of structural logic, engineered to absorb and redistribute forces that a building of this height encounters constantly. The lateral push of high winds, the ground tremors of seismic activity, the relentless bending forces that accumulate in steel over time. The V-shaped geometry was specifically chosen to resist earthquakes, reduce the building's sway, minimize column bending, and, critically, to free the interior floors from the need for intermediate columns entirely. Tenants gained vast, open, unobstructed floor plates. The structural system was not unique to Chicago in this period. The same fundamental approach had been applied to the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York. It represented the leading edge of high-rise structural engineering in its time, a philosophy that treated the building's skin as part of its skeleton. But it was the cladding of this building that would write its most famous chapter, and its most humbling one. When Big Stan opened, it was sheathed from its base to its roof in 43,000 slabs of Italian Carrara marble, the same marble that Michelangelo had chosen for his sculptures, the same stone that had graced cathedrals and palaces across Europe for centuries. White, luminous, almost translucent in certain light. It was, by every visual measure, breathtaking. The Standard Oil building became the tallest marble-clad building in the world, a distinction announced with considerable pride. Chicago had built a tower in the material of the Renaissance. There was, however, a problem buried inside that beauty. The marble had been cut thinner than had ever been attempted on a structure of this scale. Thinner stone meant lighter panels. Lighter panels meant more manageable installation. Thinner also meant, as engineers would learn to their considerable distress, structurally vulnerable in ways that laboratory tests had not fully anticipated. Marble, unlike granite, is susceptible to a process called hysteresis, a moisture-driven cycle of expansion and contraction that, over time, causes the stone to warp, bow, and weaken from within. Chicago's weather, its brutal winters, its sweltering summers, its relentless wind, accelerated that process mercilessly. The warning came on Christmas Day, 1973. Just months after the building had opened to celebration and ceremony, a 350-pound slab of marble detached from the facade and plummeted downward, tearing through the roof of the neighboring Prudential Center. It was a dramatic and frightening signal. Repairs were made, the incident was noted, but the full scope of what was happening inside those marble panels would take years to reveal itself. By 1985, inspectors examining the building closely found what many had begun to suspect: cracks running through panels, visible bowing, marble shifting away from the substrate beneath it. The facade was not merely aging, it was failing, systematically, across the entire surface of the building. Stainless steel straps were installed as an emergency measure, bolted into place to hold the marble physically against the structure, while engineers assessed the full extent of the damage. The straps worked. They also announced to every observer on the Chicago streetscape that something had gone deeply wrong with the most celebrated exterior in the city's skyline. The decision, when it finally came, was total. From 1980 to 92, every single marble slab was removed from the building, all 43,000 of them. The replacement material was Mount Airy white granite, quarried from the hills of North Carolina, selected with care for its proven durability and its visual similarity to the Carrara stone it was replacing. The cost of the recladding exceeded $80 million. Amoco, which had taken ownership of the building's identity when the company renamed itself in 1985, was reluctant to publicize the exact figure, and small wonder. By most estimates, the renovation cost represented more than half of what the entire building had originally cost to construct, without any adjustment for inflation. It remains one of the most expensive building facade replacements in architectural history. The fate of the discarded marble carried its own quiet story. 2/3 of it was crushed and used as landscaping material at Amoco's refinery in Whiting, Indiana. 1/6 was donated to Governors State University in University Park, Illinois, and 1/6 went to an organization called Regalo, a division of Lashcon Inc., whose 25 workers, all of them people with disabilities, supported by a grant from the Illinois Department of Rehabilitative Services, carved the salvaged Carrara marble into desk clocks, pen holders, and corporate mementos. Stone that had once sheathed the fourth tallest building in the world found a second life in the hands of craftspeople working quietly in a workshop in Illinois. There is something genuinely moving in that. The building itself continued its long journey through names and owners. When Amoco merged into BP, the tower was sold to the Blackstone Group in '98 for an estimated $430 to $440 million. On December 30th, 1999, it was formally renamed the Aon Center in recognition of the global professional services and insurance firm that would become its anchor tenant the following year. The building has changed hands repeatedly since, each transaction reflecting a higher valuation, reaching $713 million when investors Mark Karasik and Victor Gerstein acquired it from Piedmont Office Realty Trust in 2015. Today, the Aon Center stands as home to some of the most recognizable names in American commerce. Aon itself, the Blue Cross Blue Shield Association, Kraft Heinz. The building is managed by JLL, whose global headquarters share the same Randolph Street address. In 2018, its owners unveiled an ambitious proposal, a $185 million plan called Sky Summit, featuring a rooftop observatory, a thrill ride, and what would be the world's tallest exterior elevator. The pandemic slowed those plans, but the ambition behind them is entirely in keeping with this building's character. There is something quietly profound in the full arc of this tower's life, born in triumph, nearly undone by the very beauty meant to define it, rebuilt through determination and enormous expense, and standing still, after 50 years, as one of the anchoring pillars of one of the great urban skylines on Earth. Its Carrara marble is gone, its North Carolina granite endures, And in that transformation lives a lesson as old as the act of building itself, that the greatest structures are never the ones that never fail, but the ones that survive their failures and rise, unchanged in purpose, into the sky above. If you found this history worth knowing, subscribe for more stories of human ambition in steel, stone, and concrete.